Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 6 of Trails of Cold Steel Northern War. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Once again, we had that opening, which I think is so sad that Lavi is like chasing after her grandfather and then she sees Reen, because I think it's kind of this interesting parallel and juxtaposition because one, her grandfather was heralded as his hero and she has very complicated feelings about that. She met Reen not knowing he was the hero of Erebonia, so she kind of liked him, but then she sees him inside of Valimar because in her mind it's like he's the monster that's going to destroy my country if I don't stop him, and she has it in her mind like, oh, I'm going to stop him, I got to. So, and once again, I can't help but feel bad because it's like, once again, everyone who has that outside perspective of Reen of like sees him one way, because you're only those close to him who knew his role to play and everything. Only those in Class 7 really know the truth, and those who went to Thor's know the truth about who Reen is, you know? They know the truth of his character, but sadly everyone outside of that doesn't know him well enough to know that, so that is kind of heartbreaking. But she had that nightmare, and then they end up in Celtic, which I was like, oh man, we're in Celtic, but it didn't immediately click. I mean, yes, there's a Northern Jaeger aspect of it, but it didn't click until we saw our favorite smug bastard. I was like, yeah, Lecter. We already know he was keeping an eye on them regardless, and keeping an eye on things because Altina was already following them regardless, and then just like, oh, we happened to meet up last episode, which now you go, was that 100%? I mean, Lavi kind of fell into their laps, but still. But he shows up, and then he's not alone because Milliam's there, and Altina's there. It's like, yeah! And still the whole like, oh, Tilly, please don't call me that. Oh, Tilly and Sammy, please stop calling us that. I'm like, yeah! I mean, to be fair, she still had an issue with it in, because, you know, she still had issue with Yuna eventually calling her Allie, so it's like, obviously it's even a year in, is still nicknames and stuff, or still things she doesn't accept. I think she even told Milliam that. She was like, I still don't accept the nickname Sammy. Either way. That, what we got was quite, well, for one, it's Lecter pulling out all the cards, being the, like, smart douchebag that he is, being like, oh, I know who you are, and you are. Oh, I also know who you are, Marty, because you were with the Northern Jaegers when they burned Celtic. I was like, what? I was like, that's an amazing review, because I was under the impression, like, all right, this group would have nothing to do with it, but I also didn't know they didn't know anything, like, Lavi, Tally, nor, sorry, like none of them knew about what he did. So it kind of showed you like not all, and it's kind of a conversation that Glark has with Rogan later on, where like the Northern Jaegers aren't like in full unity. So, I wondered was that a unilateral decision that, Marty had to make, or was he following like someone else's orders? Like, was it like Rogan's orders to do like, yeah, what Alberay is telling you to do because it's for the money? So that's fascinating, which makes me almost wonder, like, he would have to be part of the squad that crossed paths with Sarah, and he doesn't even know, like, well, I mean, because we know, obviously, Sarah has her connection to the Northern Jaegers. In fact, we found out this episode, Colonel Valentine, her adopted dad, it's the one who along with Vlad, started the Northern Jaegers. So they're kind of seen as, obviously, heroes in that country. So doesn't know that he's crossed paths, like the hero is one of Sarah's students, because you can only assume he had to be one of the Northern Jaegers that Sarah fought at Aurochs Fork. You'd assume so, but maybe he wasn't there. Maybe the others were there, but he wasn't. But it's interesting because, like, right, you're in front of one of Sarah's other students, and you're after her other student too, like the hero of like they don't even, like, the connections run so deep like that. I thought that was so interesting. But everyone else on the team was kind of shocked to know, like, wait, you raised a town? And obviously they lean into it more in the anime, and like the destruction was like mild in the video game because I get it. It's like an asset thing of like, man, having to like build whole new assets, but changing and altering a little bit is one thing. That way you don't have to do too much craziness with it. But obviously they lean into it with the animation. They can draw that without it being too much of an issue. And also, like, they talked about people injured and killed. Like, to my knowledge, this might be one of those added context things of more than just Otto died. And I do love that they, well, love is kind of a strong word to say, but I thought it was poignant that they showed Otto's body, like his silhouette, being like, yes, showcase now. Because we do know, like, people like Luis did get injured and were unconscious in the aftermath of all of that. But, and we're spending, like, the next, like, couple days or whatever recovering. So, that's, Luis being one of the redheaded NPCs that, Sarah's pretty tight with, that worked at the, oh, God, the inn in Celtic. Herb, like one of the kids that hangs outside of the church, that's kind of the annoying boy that keeps like throwing bugs and bothering the girl, and she's constantly having to chase him around, that whole thing too. So they were amongst those. Plus one of the, I want to say, was it Marco, one of the merchants that had beef in the first chapter of Code Steel 1, who were like fighting over spots, like the Croydon Provincial Soldier set that whole thing up, which obviously was backed by the Imperial Liberation Front as well. So that, I know, like, one of them ended up in unconscious as well, caught up in all of the destruction. I don't want to say it was Marco, but either way. But it is that complicated Jaeger thing of, yeah, Jaegers do stuff because, I mean, especially in their... Jaegers in general will do whatever they need to do to make money. Obviously, like, you have your special cases amongst Jaegers who do some pretty bad stuff, but there's also Jaegers just like, oh, they have very carefree personalities. Doesn't change the fact is, you know, they're not dangerous, like a Zeno and Leo, or even a Shirley. Like, Shirley's like the best example of that, you know? Because obviously, like, Fee has like her, like, teasing personality, but even she's like very like stoic and it's for a good chunk, you know, until chapter 4 is when she really, well, chapter 2, but obviously chapter 4 of Code Steel 1 is when she really opens up the most. Either way, tinges and all that aside, my point was that Jaegers are like that in general, and then you add in, I was about to say, you also can't forget about Randy and his personality, but you add in the Northern Jaegers like circumstances, and then obviously it's like, right, you're going to be even extra more motivated to do whatever, especially because it's like, right, your client dishes out the orders and they made that decision. I almost wonder too, like, jumping ahead a little bit, like Code Steel 4 spoilers, but not really. I'm like, the Northern Jaegers pop up a little bit. It almost makes you wonder, would Marty be part of it? Once again, we don't know if Marty's going to survive this story, and none of those Northern Jaegers took off their helmets, so you could lean into it, thinking to yourself, some of those stuff related to Sarah that involves the Northern Jaegers, it could also, Marty could have popped up at any point in time. So it could be something like that, especially because of the Colonel Valentine angle to it all, and especially if Marty was one of the Northern Jaegers she ended up fighting. I doubt he was part of 3, so that's probably like a completely different unit in 3. So Marty probably would, even if he is still alive, canonically speaking, he probably wouldn't be involved with them working with Ouroboros. It is interesting how the shoe's on the other foot. I didn't even think about that. I completely didn't think about that perspective on it. It's like, yeah, they helped you during the Northern War, and you kind of helped them back during everything in Code Steel 3. But yeah, those are just kind of my thoughts. Either way. And also, the team finds out about Lobby. No one had any, well, except for Marty, because it's like, right, as a supervisor, I kind of have to find out information about you guys, so it wasn't too hard for him to find out about Lobby. But he kept it quiet, because at the end of the day, like, she didn't bring it up, so he wasn't going to bring it up, because it's like, yeah, that's your business. It's kind of just like Sarah and Fee. They knew about each other's circumstances, but they didn't blab to the rest of the class until those people, each one was respectively ready to open up about their circumstances until the situation happened. So it's kind of interesting, and for Lobby, for like Scarecrow, then for Lecter to know all this, you know? And so Millie and Altina trying to take them down, but it's like they're not a well-oiled machine. And it's like, right, I love at one point, Millie's trying to punch Marty, but he's like, are you really going to destroy this building? And she has to stop, because especially considering, like, well, she was also here after Duke Alberea, like, destroyed Celtic, so like you're probably going to be even more sensitive about that than other, even more so considering the circumstances. So, and I love that Asaria was like, oh, they seem like such cute girls, and now she's like, oh, like Millie's not cute, she's crazy or whatever. It's like, yeah, you have no idea. But it's like, yeah, stop going overboard. And Milliam and Altina like running into each other. They're not a well-oiled machine. And it's like, oh, sorry about that. It's like, all right, so when they go this way, I'll go that way, and you go this way. And it's like they're getting away. So they follow after Lavi. I was almost hoping they'd have a conversation where like Altina will reference Reen and Millie be like, oh, you know Reen? Like, I love that. Because, I mean, I don't know if Altina talked to Millie about like her encounter with, her and Reen's encounter with Lavi last episode or not. Probably did, but it's like, you know, because I love it if Milliam would say something, because also, let's not forget, Milliam's not only the big blabbermouth of Class 7, she's also the big blabbermouth of the Intelligence Division, so I thought that was interesting. And obviously, like, they had the orchestrated plan, and Lavi jumped into a train that was moving, and sadly, Altina followed after her, but would have gotten hit by, like, when the train was going into the tunnel, like, Altina would have smashed into the rocks, but the building in that regard. But Millie pushes her out of the way. Is like, oh, you kind of go a little overboard too, don't you? It's like, yeah. Well, Altina at this time would never admit it, but you two are so similar in so many different regards. It's just like they are the polar opposites to each other. Like, obviously, Millie's extremely extroverted, and Altina's very like reserved and introverted, but they do have like their middle grounds in some regards when they kind of overlap personality wise. But I think that's so interesting, and it's just kind of Lecter just being like, oh, well, they got away. So later on, Marty has a conversation with the rest of the team because Talion is not too happy about learning about this, and I do love that Isaria is trying to be the one that's kind of like trying to keep things a little lighthearted. But because Talion's like, yes, he's like, I know what it means to get jobs like that. He's like, I've done them too, but it's different. But for Marty, it's like, yo, like I did what I had to do. Do you have a goal in mind? He's like, then you focus on doing that, you know? Like, let that be your goal. Like, let that be the one thing you're reaching for. Then focus on that. And even telling Lavi that she can't run from her path. Like, no matter how much you want to look away from it, you're going to have to embrace it. Because they were even saying, like, hey, they could use your grandfather's circumstance. But she's like, right, like, I haven't, and she doesn't even call him grandpa, just says Vlad. She's like, Vlad, she's almost like, I guess, like, since her grandfather died, probably pre her grandfather dying, she never had, like, she probably distanced herself a lot from him because she feels like you were this hero, but you kind of lost your spark and you failed Northumbria by walking away type of thing, maybe. We haven't really gotten to the ins and outs of why she had such beef with her grandfather and what those complicated feelings stem from, but in her case, they were even suggesting like the enemy could use it to their advantage. I don't know whether they were suggesting like, oh, like maybe they could hold Lavi hostage or something like that. But then later on, Marty sacrificed himself for the others because he's like, right, I'm the type of person that has to do what I've done whatever I needed to do because of orders. You guys are youngins. You get to look at like, you get to be like more optimistic and naive. And obviously, Talion's got a goal. Do you have a goal? Then get out there and like go after it, and don't be let me do something for you. You know, because he does think that, like, regardless of it all, I think what happened does stay with him. Like, right, these are innocent people that were hurt, that were killed because of, you know, doing whatever you needed to do as a Northern Jaeger. It doesn't sit well with him. It is the ugly reality that even Talion was struggling with, but you can even see it in Isaria's face because she talked about it like 2 episodes ago of just kind of like the ugly nature of just being not just a Jaeger, but a Northern Jaeger in particular, like what you have to do. So I'm sure even Isaria's kind of got those assignments that even she wasn't those jobs that she wasn't too excited about. So each one of them kind of knows that. And I don't know if Lavi really does or not. It seems like she probably hasn't really had to do that, but from what we can tell. So ultimately they end up capturing Marty, but then it's kind of like he's like, I mean, obviously, Lecter being the gambler that he is, he's kind of like, oh yeah, like kind of the dark horse in this situation is you. And I'm always kind of betting on kind of the dark horse in this regard. And as we know, when Lecter kind of makes a gamble, it's more likely going to come through on his side of things because he's quite the gambler. He's got the mind for it. So my immediate thought is, well, we know that Marty was part of the squad that burned Celtic, and we also know the main thing that Erebonia used as its reason to kind of encroach upon Northumbria was like, yo, you're gonna pay us reparations. God, reparations. I don't know why I kept messing out. Reparations for what happened to Celtic. And Northumbria said no. Now, I'm wondering if specifically it was Rogan that was like, no, and kind of put up more of the fight. We'll kind of get to that in a second, but because we know they're setting the stage for that, especially because Claire, who I love that it's like, oh yeah, you were teaching at the military police camp. It's like, all right, I didn't even think about it. It's like, yeah, this would be around the time Una would get to really, in its time frame is around the time Una would get to know you, so. But even Claire's like, right, because also this is still relative. I mean, it's been a little while. It's been a couple months, obviously, at this point in time. But she's probably still kind of adjusting to the whole, well, new circumstances. And she kind of feels bad because it's like, right, finding out about Rufus being, the actual head of the Iron Bloods. Still probably dealing with that because even the way she kind of approached and talked to him, you could tell it's like... And he didn't get caught up on the formalities of like, he didn't say nothing of the lines of like, hey, we're equal, we're both Iron Blood. So like kind of, like she kind of tries to talk to him normally, but there's still kind of like that disconnect because she also, Claire, like her and Milliam, I'd even go as far as Lecter has a good heart too. Like truth be told, is like, Rufus is the only duplicit, really, truly duplicitous one. Lecter had his moments, but he still has like a good heart overall, despite the complications. But Rufus is the one that's the most duplicitous. Because you even say like, even Osborn isn't as bad as Rufus in some regards. But either way, that's a whole thing. So obviously Claire, being who she is, kind of pieces it together like, okay, so you really are going to like force Northumbria's hands by going down the reparations route. And it's like, yeah, we are. So, and the long of it all, they probably knew that the Northern Jaegers weren't going to let that happen. But at the same time, you also have to think, well, how much is the grand scheme of things, like how far back were all these planned with like Ouroboros helping out the Northern Jaegers because you knew it would turn into a fight. But the whole point was to eventually lead to the Great Twilight anyway, just because the Grandmaster, like, she sees all this stuff, like, well in advance and stuff. Kind of got a lot of this planned out. So I'm curious. That's my only reason for thinking that Ouroboros would back Northumbria the way they did. Because what other reason would you have to back them in that regard? It's just because you want to back them to escalate things even more so. Because we know that the Northern Jaegers are like, Northumbria is like, no, we're not paying that. Now, that might not just be on... a decision by Glark or even Rogan. That's like some of the officials. Now the officials might want to actually pay the reparations, even though like the country's in debt, and they're probably like forcing everyone to pay up just so they can pay off the reparations. Because I think the wording was exactly like, it was a very high amount that the Empire knew that Northumbria didn't have the money to pay back. So you add in that plus like Rogan and Glark's issues right now. I could definitely see Rogan, taking this situation, and he's already kind of going rogue, so seeing him go rogue even more beyond, and then like he doubles down and is like, right, we're gonna, because he's the one that him and Glark have this whole conversation, because he sees Glark as someone that's antiquated, like, you're old, you're forgotten. I mean, at least the others had the decency to go off and die, like Vlad and Valicine, and not become a washed up hero like you. But from Glark's point of view, it's like, I have like age and wisdom to know how young and impertinent you are. You're impatient. You think you've got it all figured out. You want to go to war with Erebonia, who has the resources and the military might. The only other country in this that could stand alone to Erebonia's military might is Calvert, and even that's like that's even before the whole element of adding in the soldots. And which haven't been fully mass produced to the level that they're at in 3, because obviously that mass production got severely yanked up over like in between that time frame, plus escalating and bumping that up even more in preparations for the War of Calvert. So it is that thing of like, yeah, like Glark sees himself as like, I am someone that I know my friends Vlad and Valicine would back me in what I'm doing. They would be proud of the decision I've made. And like you are so quick to put us in a position where you will doom us, because I can see the bigger picture in all of this when you can't. So, or was that Rogan that said that? Either way, we know that secretly him and Jaina are on the same side, which I do love that bit where it's kind of like, oh, when they reference Claire as the icy mating, it's like, ooh, is she another like frigid smiled person? And it's like, don't worry, I'm gonna let Jaina know you said it. She's like, I'm kidding. It's like, yeah. But we know Jaina's like knows about the Ouroboros archaism of it all. So does Rogan. So I guess Jaina's playing it close to the vest, like, oh, I'm on your side. I mean, to be fair, this franchise in general, there's so much duplicitous characters. It's like, oh, like someone pretending to be something that they're not. Whether it's the faceless, Weissman, whether it's him, whether it's plenty of Gralsritter people kind of hiding who they are across multiple arcs in this series. A certain Black Alberic hiding who he really was too. So it is, I mean, even using Rufus, for example, hiding the fact is that he's actually an Ironblood, that he's been one for a very, very long time. So it's such an interesting situation that's going on, and once again getting this purview of like being able to see these different perspectives of this particular event. Once again, this thing that we don't know that much about the Northern War, and getting this lead up to it, but also these different perspectives that lead up to what we kind of know, what we do know of the Northern War. So after it's all said and done, Lavi, Issaria and Talion are just kind of beaten down, where it's just like, man, Marty got captured. We kind of had to leave him behind. And even Lavi's thinking like, what is it that I want? What am I aiming for? Now, part of me wonders, I wonder, because they're going to try and probably get back to Northumbria, but they'd have to probably go to like Heimdall first and then kind of go from there, maybe. I mean, it's pretty hard considering, like, well, the government already, they've known what you've been doing since you first came to the country, to Erebonia. But part of me was almost wondering, too, do you think we can get them stopping by in Trista? Because that would be interesting, considering, like, well, once again, because this would also be during Rean's second year, so if they ended up at the academy, unless he's out on a mission, they could end up running into him. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So I was just wondering, like, if they could go to Tristan and kind of hear a different perspective, because I'm sure everyone in that town has a very different perspective on Rain. I mean, obviously, because they know him in a very different light than even just the hero that the rest of Erebonia sees him as. But either way, it's definitely going to be interesting. Whether we get that or not, that's just kind of something I'm wondering, like, what they do. But whether we do it or not is irrelevant. What's definitely going to be interesting is seeing where all of this goes in the aftermath. Once again, using Marty probably as their ploy to really push that whole, yeah, you got to pay us back, Northumbria, for you burning Celtic down. Yeah, it might have been during war. Yeah, it might have been because they were following orders of their client, who was, Duke Albereo. I think the argument could be like, yeah, he's not suffering nearly the repercussions that they are, but, so that's once again, that's the whole point. So I'm very excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.